Kathryn, Senior Fellow at the National Review, joins us now, along with Naomi Schafer-Riley, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, who recently released a book about major concerns for child welfare and the foster system. We'll get to that book in a moment. Thank you both for joining me today. Kathryn, congratulations. We're celebrating National Adoption Month and also your award. You were just honored for your coverage of this issue. Talk to us about why Catholics, in particular, should care about it.
Well, anyone, Montse, who prays the Liturgy of the Hours, the prayer of the Church, knows that we're constantly being reminded that God cares for the widows and the orphans, and so we must too. And as Catholics, we kind of have a disadvantage in some ways that we have these huge institutions that we often contribute money to. And so we kind of assume that someone is taking care of that issue. And we don't think in terms of what are the needs around my parish? Who are the foster families in my parish? Has anyone adopted in my parish? Can we help them? Can we rally around them, wrap around them with love? And if you have a foster child who is in the foster system, who is obviously, but they very often have many issues that involve trauma and other things. So Catholics really need to get more involved in asking those questions. What are the needs?
And those are very practical points. Naomi, you just came out with a book that stresses that we should all be adults in dealing with welfare policies, the policy battle. What has changed in how we look at these issues, and what still needs to change?
So unfortunately, thank you, Montse, for having me, but the child welfare system really seems to revolve these days around the needs and sensibilities and desires of adults and not the best interests of children, which is quite unfortunate. Those 424,000 children that you mentioned in the foster care system, the average amount of time that they spend in the system is 20 months. In states like New York, where I live, it's actually 30 months. And then a significant chunk, as many as 20% of kids, are spending upwards of 3 years in the system in this kind of temporary holding pattern. And we are not finding them safe, loving, permanent homes, in part because our court systems and our child welfare agencies think that the most important interests are those of their parents and their families, who, are sometimes trying to rehabilitate, sometimes not. But we really need to be thinking about how we can make sure that kids have the proper attachment, development, and that they get into these homes as quickly as possible so that they can grow up in a normal life.
In a stable environment, for sure. Kathryn, tell us about how the foster care crisis has changed with the COVID-19 pandemic. Has anything made it worse? Is it better? Are there more resources?
Well, if you're an adult who is in a stable situation, you had a hard time during COVID. Imagine what it was like if you're in a home where there's abuse and the child is not going to school, so there are no other adults to see the signs of abuse. Worse, definitely worse. And I just have to say, Montse, I appreciate you mentioning the National Council for Adoption Award, but Naomi's book is essential reading. And I think especially for pro-lifers, this is an issue that we don't often think about, and we need to. Naomi writes very powerfully about how ideology has crept into the foster care system, and these are things that we, again, don't talk about in the way that we should. These are fixable problems, but it's going to require people to actually pay attention.
That's right. Naomi, tell us about recruitment and retention of parents and host families for these children. How do faith-based agencies and charities stack up? Is it ideology that's a great barrier for them? Tell us about that.
So I think we've seen kind of a revolution in a lot of churches and faith-based agencies. A lot of evangelical churches, frankly, have really stepped up in the last 10 or 15 years. They've completely revolutionized the way we recruit and train and support foster families. They realized that putting up a picture of a child on the nightly news was not a very effective recruitment technique. And now you have pastors who literally go into their pulpits and they say to people on a Sunday morning, these are the 6 children in our zip code who need a home tonight. And that is a very urgent and powerful message. They also add a lot to the training for foster parents. Instead of just telling parents, like, these are the number of fire extinguishers the state requires you to have in your house, they're adding all sorts of important information about trauma-informed care for these kids and really providing people with the tools that they need. And finally, they're providing that support that Kathryn talked about, looking around you in your community and seeing ways that you can help, even if you are not fostering, thinking about ways you can support, whether it's providing respite care or building furniture or just praying for other people in the community. Half of foster parents quit within the first year because it is very hard.
And they need a community to come around them and support them. Kathryn, you've written about that, but you've also written about the barriers, the ideological barriers for some of these couples. Tell us about that in the training that Naomi was mentioning.
Well, as Naomi writes about in her book, there's really actually torture that some of these foster parents in training go through. We have a mutual friend who, because she and her husband are not Black, and they were adopting biracial children, fostering first, they really were traumatized, being told that they were stealing their children from their heritage. And the fact of the matter is there are more white parents who are available to foster and adopt than Black children. And so are we going to penalize the child because there aren't more Black parents to foster and adopt? No, we can't do that. And I just want to say one quick thing too, Montse, the work that you do in your day job at the Beckett Fund has been so important in this realm, to have the faith-based agencies to be able to operate, to provide that wraparound care and really walk parents through the whole process. And it's essential. And so the religious liberty aspect is very crucial, as well as the very practical things, because the practical are affected when laws keep faith-based charities in this realm.
And they have to do what they do, inspired and animated by their religious beliefs. And so it's great to know that in this country we can do that. Naomi, last question for you, just about policy recommendations. What can we do? What should we do coming around in a bipartisan way to help children?
Yeah. So, Montse, there are two really important pieces of legislation that we passed in this country in the 1990s. And those pieces of legislation are regularly flouted. The first one is called the Adoption and Safe Families Act. And it says that if a child has been in foster care for 15 of the last 22 months, a state is supposed to move to terminate parental rights. And what that means is we're putting a time limit on foster care. We're saying this is not a permanent place for a kid. And there was a bipartisan support for this idea. And now you have kids who are in foster care for 3, 4, 5, even more years at a time because we're ignoring that law. The second really important law is the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act. And it says we cannot discriminate on the basis of skin color when it comes to placing children for foster care or adoption. We had amazing progress in this country since that law was passed. Tens of thousands more Black children were able to find permanent, safe, loving homes as a result of that law. And now I tell you, there are people who are trying to overturn it, who think that matching skin color is more important than finding those homes for children. And it is absolutely a shame.
Well, we're grateful for your work, Kathryn and Naomi, for your expertise. I hope that you'll have a megaphone to be able to help these children because we know our Lord loves them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.